Okay, that's Jared, and he's from Hershey, Pennsylvania. So if that doesn't make you crave chocolate, I don't know what will. All right, let me make just a few announcements that Toshi has asked me to make. The first one is please check the announcements on Learning Suite. There's at least half a dozen that you should be interested in, including when we're going to meet during reading days, how you can look at your exams and see what's happened, how can you study for the final, how can you be ready, etc. Be a good idea to do that as much as you can before the final. Remember, Monday is our last time we meet, and it will be our review that I do. And it's the only review, because there is no TA review for the final. So I will give the review, and it's on Monday, so please be there. One of the biggest announcements is there's a grade check form. Grade check form. So listen carefully to this. You need to let Toshi know by Friday if there's any problems in your grades. If you think there's an issue, he has a form there you can fill out, and he'll go through by hand and check. If you do not let him know by Friday, then your grade stands. Okay, that's very important for you to understand. With 1,000 students, I think you understand we have to have some control, right? Some control. On the exam, I'd like to congratulate everybody. Literally the highest average score in 15 years of teaching at BYU on a 201 exam. 84% median. So y'all did great. Give yourself a hand. That's fantastic. Fantastic. So we had 11 perfect scores. Yet another record, 11 perfect scores. So you guys killed it. We did a great job of preparing. Remember, next time is the personal finance on Wednesday. And your spouses are welcome. We're going to talk, or significant others, we're going to talk about whether you should rent or buy a home, the process for buying a home, and on developing your credit scores. Okay, so that's Wednesday, and then that next Monday is what I was talking about. I think I misspoke. That's the last day of class. That's the review. Everybody but about 280 took the test. Now, people are asking me about the curve. I have no idea what the curve is going to do. 300 opted not to take the first test, and like 290 opted not to take the second test. I don't know if those are straight A students who just don't need to take tests and they're going to max the final, or if those are students who are just totally not prepared, in which case they're going to have a pretty difficult time cramming for the final exam. So I just have no idea what the curve is going to look like. Go ahead. I don't even know. I didn't do that analysis. So we had 1,000 students in class, 300 didn't take the first, 290 didn't take the second, and I don't know if it's the same group, you know, what they're about. Okay, moving on. I do ask you to take notes today. This may become testable. It'll just, you know, if I look around and see people texting and on their computers and I get a little ticked off, it's testable. You know what I'm saying? If I feel like not enough people are here, it's testable. So basically, please don't text. You can go an hour and 15 minutes without texting your sweetie, okay? And please put your computers away. You can go an hour without having the internet and give your undivided attention to Brother Warner. And the reason I think this is important is this, guys. He's going to talk and give us examples about ways that we can help the poor maybe 20 years from now, 15 years from now. He's going to give us examples of things students did when they were in your seats. He's going to tell you a story about how 3 students decided they wanted to do something about 80. And how they've changed tens of thousands of lives. 3 students. So there's stuff that you can actually be doing right now to help the poor. And what I want you to do maybe is to catch a vision of what Brother Warner has spent his entire life doing. I hope that maybe you can catch that vision along with me. In fact, I invited my lovely wife here, and I want to embarrass her and have Sister Brow stand up. I told you I married my best friend and the most spiritual person that I could find, and her good looks were just a bonus. So I'm proud to have Sister Brow here with me, Michelle, my wife. She is friends with Warner as well. And then we are also Warner's going to send me links to, if you haven't planned your summer completely yet, and you don't have a full-on internship, or you're going to have a couple weeks between classes, he's going to provide me links to some of his NGOs where you could volunteer to go do work among the poor. Okay, help poor Latter-day Saints, poor return missionaries, and others of Heavenly Father's children. So let me introduce our guest speaker. And he told me, he's a very humble man. He said, "You don't need to introduce me." He's just said it again. And he's a super proud and humble guy. But when you have a Wikipedia page, you know you got to use that for your bio. right? So from his Wikipedia page, Warner P. Woodworth is a professor emeritus from the Department of OLS in the Marriott School, so our home school. He's a leading advocate of development of microcredit and has been involved in research as well as developing such programs. He's going to tell us about some of those. Woodworth graduated from South High School in Salt Lake City in 1960. So you can do the math if you want to know how long he's been working. Woodworth holds a bachelor's and master's degree from BYU as well as a master's and a PhD from the University of Michigan. Okay, so go Big Blue. He's also held various visiting scholar appointments, including the first Peter Drucker Centennial Scholar, which is a huge honor, guys. Among other positions, he was the co-editor and the founder of the Journal of Microfinance. Among the organizations that he has helped found is Enterprise Mentors International, Unitas Microcredit, and Help International. 3 of the NGOs he's going to tell us about today. He currently serves as chairman of the board for Help and on multiple other boards. Help International is an outgrowth of Help Honduras, which happened when Hurricane Mitch occurred. He's going to tell us about that as one of his case examples. Among the books that he has, Small is Really Beautiful, United for Zion, Principles for Uniting the Saints to Eliminate Poverty and Working Towards Zion. And I have his Working Towards Zion book here. So it is an amazing treatise, I think, and how he ties gospel LDS principles to the work of microfinance and microcredit. Okay? He says that's good. He wants somebody to get going. So, okay. I could keep going, but let me just say this as the last thing. In 1999 is when I met Warner. He was in our bishopric when Shell and I were over in Yview Apartments building our house. And I found out the work that he does. And I've been watching him ever since. We've done research papers together. And I literally want to tell you that I'm so thrilled Warner could be here. He is one of my heroes in life. And I don't have very many heroes in life that I look up to. There's a very small list. And he's one on that list. So please pay attention, try and feel through the Spirit what he's going to teach us here, and maybe see what we can do to help some of Heavenly Father's children.
Thank you, sir. I remember when Jimmy was around here in the old days, and he was a young man then. Now he's probably 30, I don't know. What are you, Jimmy? Shelley's still 27, but you're probably close to 40 now. So, how are you guys? Are you good? How many heard anything at conference the last couple days? How many saw anything at conference? How many went to conference in the big building? Fantastic. So, that was, to me, an inspiring set of discourses and visions for us as a people. Especially love President Monson's wrap-up on love, on charity, on community, on working together. And I so admire Brother Brow, Jimmy, and his family. His daughter was in my class. Last spring, they sat in my last class I taught at BYU on microfinance. And one of those last classes, we went to Salt Lake to hear my colleague, my friend, Muhammad Yunus of the Green Bank. And we've collaborated on some research. We're still going to keep doing that. I quit my job at BYU last fall, so I'm a free spirit. I got back from Cuba a couple weeks ago. I had a beautiful beard and mustache, and not much up here still, but I felt so liberated to be around communists and socialists and Catholics and have a beard. Maybe we'll do something in Cuba. Raul Castro is basically running the show now. And they've laid off 1 million Cubans. They have about 12 million on the island. So it's a huge problem. So I'm going to start a microfinance program in Cuba because they're now more interested in entrepreneurial and free market ideas. They've got to be, since the Soviet Union collapsed, stopped supporting them, and then Venezuela collapsed. So they're hurting a bit, and I don't know, we'll see where it goes. Hopefully that'll lead to the church being able to open up there. There was a great branch of 12 people, 3 of them Cuban, 9 of them from other countries, that went to Cuba to learn how to be medical doctors. Go to medical school there, all their expenses are paid and stuff, and then they'll go back to Costa Rica, Nicaragua, Brazil, Atlanta, Georgia, which is also part of the third world, right? So they come from other countries, they're going black. I was there to help ordain a new convert from Georgia, a young black man that had joined the church in Cuba. So here's the deal. I want to talk today about how we can use this set of concepts and methodologies to fight poverty. I hope we'll have fun. I hope you'll feel free to ask questions. I'm going to try to, walk us through an array of projects and organizations, some short-term, some long-term, some hugely successful, some modestly successful, around the globe. And I don't know what success really means necessarily. I was hearing these two doctors down at Utah Valley Hospital talk about who they like to do surgeries on. Have you heard this story? No. So the one surgeon says to the other, "I'll tell you my favorite patients to operate on." The guy said, "What's that?" He said, "I lay them out on the table, I plunge the knife in, I rip them open." Well, I was just getting to that, thank you. So he said, as I open them up, I realized these are accountants. I love to do surgery on accountants because when you open their chest cavity, everything's nice and neat and organized, perfect, immaculate, laid out internally just like their offices. And then he said to his friend, like, for example, what's your favorite patient? The guy said, "The kind of people I like to do surgery on are professors in the Marriott School." The guy said, "That sounds crazy. Why is that?" He said, "Because when you spread them out and you open them up, you look inside, you see there's no heart, no guts, and the head and rear end are interchangeable." I'm sure that's been your experience with others, not in this class, of course. Certainly not in this class. So I want to talk a little about what do we do to empower and to bless the so-called dregs of society, the criminals, the addicts, the prostitutes, the thieves, the beggars, who are just too dang lazy to get up and work. That's our stereotype of a huge portion of our world here in the U.S., as well as other countries. I want to talk a little about how this notion of microcredit or microfinance can alter people's lives, how it can give them dignity, how it can give them purpose, how they can overcome their weaknesses, how they can have strong, healthy, happy families, how they can live the sort of ideals mentioned in the proclamation on the family. So this is a simple little outline. We're going to look at the problem quickly, talk about microfinance as a strategy for change, how we might build global platforms to address the problems of poverty using microcredit, microfinance, then quickly highlight a few little cases, some relevant to BYU and your world now as a student, others programs created by professionals, created by businessmen, businesswomen, created by folks in the public sector, etc. And then end up just a little on the issue of the responsibilities to build family self-reliance or community self-reliance, community reliance. So if we look at the last few decades, especially the last 10 years or so, we see the huge disasters, natural crises, typhoons in the Philippines, earthquakes in Haiti, conflicts in many parts of the globe, genocide, 9/11 in our own country, in New York City, etc. It's hard to stay alive in many parts of the world. To have a quality of life, for many, it's extremely difficult. A huge chunk of the Earth's population just trying to feed their kids today. The parents are trying to get enough food or money to be able to take care of their kids for today. And the notion of them ever coming to a place like this, and I'm talking not just people in the world, but members of the LDS Church. They'll never be in a building like this. They'll never have an education like you do. They'll never own a car like some of you are driving, parking in student parking. And so, do we have an opportunity? Do we have a responsibility? I think we do. I first got into this stuff back in the 80s. And in the early 90s, I met Muhammad Yunus and convinced BYU to bring him here a couple times, and then convinced them to give him an honorary degree. First Muslim receiving an honorary doctorate at BYU. And we've been partners since then. And he's come to campus probably 20 times now, given lectures, given seminars, hung out with us. And the reason I want to just mention him is because he's so generous with his time and energy. He's collaborated with me. He's been on the boards of a couple of my little NGOs. I was on his startup in New York, or Grameen, New York. And what I like is this guy, he breaks the tradition. He thinks about, well, here's the way poverty exists. Here's the way people are chained to their extreme situation. And what would happen if we took some, tools and broke those chains? What would happen? He's talked about, the day is going to come. And I think it's going to be in your lifetime. I'm hoping it's in my lifetime. But in the next 15 to 20 years, I think extreme poverty will be eliminated from the planet. And that day, when that day comes, Eunice says, you guys will take your kids and take them on a tour to Chicago or Salt Lake or LA, and you'll say, while we're here on our vacation, let's go into this interesting museum. It will be a museum of poverty. Your kids will go in there and find out, my gosh, there used to be a day when people starved to death on this planet. There used to be a day when a huge percent of women were oppressed, when they couldn't get jobs and they couldn't make their own jobs and they couldn't get loans because they were female. And, I don't know when that might happen. I'm optimistic. A lot of signs are beginning to suggest that day is coming. But you and I have got to do some work to get there. If we look at the globe, we have about 2.5 billion people living on $2 a day or less. And whether in our church or any other church, whether in the U.S. or any other society, this is a major crisis. So as we look around, we see the situation. If I reflect on members of the church, as represented by these here, Natasha, an elderly grandma, Babushka in Moscow, or Hermano Flores in Mexico, or Sister Ilagan in the Philippines, or the Browns living in Topeka, Kansas. Many of them have struggled and suffered. The recession of the last 4 years has devastated a lot of people. We're coming out of it. Your parents are probably coming out of it. Maybe you are. But we still have these huge issues globally and in the U.S. Brother Brigham's suggestion that we can never solve the spiritual problems if we don't also solve the temporal problems. Because in the end, everything is spiritual. And if we had time to reflect on Marion G. Romney or Johnny Witzel or Elder Jeff Holland, we'd be blown away by how radical these guys were when they talk about the need to build Zion, the need to change the culture, the need to lift up those whose hands hang down. And so hopefully this class lecture today, this presentation, will give you some ideas, some visions for what you might do to deal with the inequities in per capita income between us and poor countries, to confront the illiteracy challenges around the globe, to feel more compassion, perhaps, for the children who die under the age of 5. Today, while we're on this planet, about 30,000 little babies and little kids are going to die. Most of them could be alive if they had a little medicine or a little protein. And then we've got child exploitation, which in so many countries, kids can't go to school because their parents need them to beg on the street or to work in the factory or to plant and harvest out in the fields. And they'll never have a chance to develop the kind of education you guys have. So if we reflect on some of the church's teachings, Spencer W. Kimball argued what we need is a united order, which is a little different than traditional capitalism. It's the full economic plan of Zion, where everybody's lifted up. Or Lorenzo Snow, we should use our surplus to employ the poor, not invest in gold and silver, but to create jobs, to enable many more men, women, and children in those early pioneer towns, if they want a job, to have a job. John Taylor said that was the main calling of the state president, to be sure everybody in their states had employment. Ezra Taft Benson, we need to figure out this law of consecration. It's not some crazy experiment. It's a mandatory law for us to practice. And you and I can do it. Those who've been to the temple know we've already covenanted to live the law of consecration. Not when Jesus comes, not when there's some big, huge shakeup in the world and the prophet says, okay, now we're all going to live the united order. No, Brigham said, why can't we live it now? We can be doing this in our own lives, in our own families, and eventually we'll change the planet. And Brother Maxwell argues we need more consecrated saints, not worldly saints focused on worldly care. So I'm going to just run through 5 or 6 examples. Grameen itself, and how some Latter-day Saints, have you read the chapter for today? Just testing you. Anybody read a chapter today? What chapter is it? Okay, fantastic. I need to read that someday. I heard it's good. So it talks a little about Grameen and Eunice, correct? In fact, it's the best book you'll ever read. But I don't think it does it talk about Mormons taking Grameen Bank principles and applying them? Yeah, the research, the econ stuff, okay. Then Welesabugu in Mali, where we work among Muslims, country that's 96% Muslim. Help International was a BYU student initiative. And I'm hoping you'll get a glimpse of what you could maybe do, even while you're here in school. You'll hear some bureaucrats and some campus administrators, maybe even some deans, or somebody in the ASB say, no, you shouldn't go out and try to change the world. You're just students. You're too poor. Stay here, get focused, get your degree. They want you here and out, right? But if you want to have a rich experience, you want to learn some other stuff besides your textbooks while you're here. Who was it that said, never let your classrooms interfere with your education? Don't know who said that. So we'll look at a couple of examples here and end up with Unitas, which is a pretty amazing organization that was started by some folks who read the Zion book, my Zion book, and then started flying out here from Connecticut or the Bay Area or Seattle to say, Warner, how can we practice some of this? I've got all this money. I've got this career. I'm retiring now. I've got to spend money and I've got to give away money. What could I do with it? And out of that we formed Unitas. And since that time we started, we've raised just a little over $800 million. Not pesos, dollars. Okay? And then we'll end up on some faint Haiti here. So I love this quote from Brother Brigham because he doesn't say the poor are poor because they're lazy, like you often hear, even in the hallowed halls of BYU. They're just lazy. They don't want to work. They're not educated. They don't want to be educated, etc. What does he say? The poor are poor why? Just shout it out. Anybody see that?
Lack of opportunity.
Lack of opportunity. You go to the third world. How many did a third world mission? I'm talking LA. Come on, anybody? So you see the poor in those countries. They're always busy. They're working. They're scraping. It's tough to live on $1 a day or $2 a day. They are very entrepreneurial people. To be able to survive and take care of their spouses and also raise their kids on less than $1 or $2 a day. So Brigham's arguing they don't have the opportunity, and that's our job as Latter-day Saints, to help them, teach them how to live, how to become healthy, wealthy, and wise. Not to keep them impoverished. That's not our goal. Our goal is to help them have a better future and enable them to live the gospel more fully. So here's some definitions, and I assume you've read those in the text. These are kind of my takes on, microcredit is usually the term used for tiny loans to the poor to create business, not to buy a iPad or something. The entrepreneur receives that microcredit, that microloan. The business they start is some kind of income generating activity, right? A microenterprise. Usually when this process occurs, it's done through a communal bank or village bank. So maybe you, 20 or 30 over here, if I'm working on the staff of an NGO doing microfinance, microcredit, I might come around and talk to some of you and ask you, in this town, where are the poorest people living? And I'll go ask the mayor or the village elders or whatever. And they say, it's you folks, you live down under tarps. You've been there 20 years since the volcano hit the Philippines, or 10 years since the floods hit Central America. And I'll say, okay, you're the people we're looking for. Come next Saturday to the town square, and we're going to have a meeting to start a new little group, a Banco Comunal, or Caisse Villageois. And when you get there, those who show up, we're going to teach you a little about what microcredit, microfinance, microenterprise is. And then over a couple of more weeks on those Saturdays for a couple hours, we're going to train you. This is what finance is. This is what a loan is. This is what interest on the loan is. This is principal. A loan is not a gift. You got to pay it back, blah, blah, blah. And get them prepared and have them start thinking about little businesses. And then you 4 or 5 here, we're going to get you together, or you're going to get yourselves together with others in this group of 30 you like, you trust. You've seen them showing up to the meeting. You know they're learning something. And you're going to form a little Grupo Solidario, a little solidarity group. And when the day comes we give out the loans, we're going to give $100 to each person, $100 to each person in your group. And you're going to commit to paying off your loan in 4 months or 6 months, but also everybody else's. So you want to pick good groups, good friends, not your relatives, And for you 3 males, you're going to want to be sure you have some women like these 2 here, because they're going to be a heck of a lot more responsible than you slackers, right? And that's how it starts. And then we'll give you each a loan. And we'll tell you, if your group pays all your loans back with interest, according to the time, let's say 4 months, with 10% interest or 5% interest or whatever, you do that, we're going to give you a $200 loan next time. And so you can start growing some capital, growing your business, hiring more people, buying more raw material as you go. Does that make sense? That's kind of how it works. And we'll meet every week, every Saturday at 3 o'clock, 3 horas, to review how we're doing, have everybody pay $10 on their loan, plus 25 centavos interest, or whatever, however we may structure that. Okay? So that's the idea. An MFI is a microfinance institution. Microfinance, that term alone, sometimes, often in fact, refers to larger than just micro-lending programs, like what? Micro-insurance, micro-loans for schooling or education, micro-savings. Often these NGOs will require you to save for a couple months in an account with them. And then you learn what savings is. You learn the value of family finance, of managing your resources, managing your incomes, etc. And then the NGOs may be doing other things such as healthcare, technology, agriculture, literacy, lots of other possibilities, okay? So let's talk Grameen just real quickly, almost like a film here. But it's a different model because the most unique thing about Grameen, there's two, really. It's for the women and it's for the poor. And if you're somewhat wealthy and successful in Bangladesh, you're not going to get a loan from Grameen. So it started out as a rural bank. It still is, mostly rural, focusing on the poorest of the poor, and no collateral is needed, okay? If you have collateral, Grameen isn't going to give you a loan. They want to give loans to the people who have absolutely no collateral, no credit history, no credit card, etc. Their focus is on the poorest. They figure most others can have a better alternative than Grameen Bank. And if you look at these two columns, traditional banks leave out women. Often you have to have land or collateral. The repayment rate in lots of banks around the globe is 70% or 75%. Most cultures, women depend on men for money. So they're abused, they're ignored. The kids aren't allowed to go to school. They don't have money for health care, etc. And usually it's the man, the single head of the household, they're running this. Whereas with Grameen, they sort of looked at all these features of tradition and said, let's turn that upside down. Let's only give loans. Initially they started with men and women, but pretty soon they shifted to giving most of their loans to women. Why would that be the case? Did you read that, or what do you think? Why might a bank whose interest is on helping the very poor, why would they mostly give loans to women? Yell loud so they can hear. Yeah, the men can go down the street in town and get their loan. Or maybe it's because the men don't pay back those loans at the same rate. Maybe it's because the women tend to be the ones, when they get a loan and start a business and start making some income, they tend to use that money to help their children, to buy them books for school, to increase their vitamins, to be able to take the child when he breaks his arm falling out of a tree or falling off the bus in the village or whatever. They can go get the bone repaired, get a doctor to see it, put a splint on it, or a cast or something, whereas most men don't do that with their money. What do most men do around the globe when they have money? Alcohol, what else? Drugs, what else? You're getting closer. Women, prostitution. Maybe it's not prostitution, maybe it's just their girlfriend in the next village. And then they have another one in the next village, you know? And gambling. So somehow, men tend to be, for whatever reason, pretty irresponsible with financial resources. So UNA said, let's give it to the women. And so they shifted from 50-50 men and women percentage rates of receiving loans. And they said, let's give it to women because they don't have collateral. Got a huge success in terms of benefiting the family. And the woman feels more dignified. She has purpose in her life. So Grameen started out in the 70s. In 83, it was restructured into being a new institution, a bank for the poor in Bangladesh. The government approved it. They focused primarily on the rural area. And you know, the loans are for groups, etc. So here's just a couple slides of pictures. I've been there 3 times to Bangladesh. Every time I go, I'm amazed at how much better the villages and the towns where they have Grameen are from those that still don't. So here's before and after, a woman with her old rundown house and her new house. Kids, especially girls, having the chance to go to school, get an education. They somehow figured out the same thing Brigham Young taught, which was in his day, if parents can only send one of their kids to school, make sure it's the girl, not the boy. Because the girl getting an education, growing up to be a woman, be a mother, she will train the next generation. They'll have a better future than if the man doesn't. And these women have learned how to start all these businesses, how to solve problems as a group, how to support each other. They don't believe in this capitalism that says it's you or me, and I'm going to kill you, or I'm against you, I'm going to destroy you, I'm going to take over your business. Their notion is let's lift each other. It's a little idea we call Zion. So Eunice has had a lot of success and recognition by the government and by the White House and by U.S. Congress, as well as the Nobel Peace Prize. These are some stats. We'll put all this online for you to check out later. If you look at the difference between traditional banks, got a misspelled word there, and Grameen, there's some fairly interesting alternatives there. So, one of the great powers of Grameen has been that it inspires other people all over the globe. It wasn't known in the 70s, it wasn't known in the 80s. But it began to be known in the 90s and has become a huge success. I'm blown away by the numbers of Mormons who have looked at Grameen and said, why can't we do that? We've got the priesthood, or we've got the Holy Ghost, or we've got money. What can we do to change our own world using Grameen as a model? And so one of my friends who's an entrepreneur started a business here in town. He has about 1,000 workers now. He said, I am making too much money. My colleagues, my presidents, vice presidents, he's chairman of the board, we got more money we know what to do with. It gets tiring going to Disney World. It gets tiring going to the cruise to Hawaii. He said, I said, give it to finance students here at BYU, but they didn't like that idea. So he started this organization called Yehu Microfinance Trust. So it's a nonprofit in Mombasa, Kenya, that now has about 30,000 clients. When my friend Lewis started that organization, I remember some colleagues, we were both on a corporate board together, and I remember some of my friends saying, Lewis, you're just washing that money down the rat's hole. You're not going to be able to help Africa. Africa doesn't want your help. They're irresponsible, they're lazy, etc. They're uneducated. This guy went over and started with 10 women, his first little bank, Yehu Bank, and now he's got something like 30,000 clients among the very poorest people. And he partners in Kenya some points of the year with Jamii Bora Trust, which is in the biggest slum in Nairobi. In fact, it's the biggest slum in Africa. And they go into that area of the slums and find the most bitter, most angry, the ex-cons, the guys with guns in their hands, the drug addicts, the pushers, the prostitutes. And they say, you're exactly the kind of person we're looking for. We want to help you. We want to give you a loan. We want to empower you. And they now have over 1,000 employees, and almost all of them, not only are they from the slums, but they were addicts or they were criminals. And now they're handing out $30,000 in loans every week. So Lewis has figured out how to do this. He's found a way to change the problems in southern Kenya. And through his experience with Jamii Bora, he's learned that somehow this process of getting a micro loan gives a person a sense of dignity and meaning. Here's another group, Welesabubu. Back in '85, many members of the church were writing Salt Lake, the brethren, saying, we should be doing something to help East Africa. CNN was just starting up, and we'd see in living color at 9, live video from Ethiopia, mothers with babies in their arms dying right on the camera. And members began to say, we should do more as a church with our offerings. And by the way, I want to be sure you understand, you should pay tithing and you should give the church your offerings first. But some of these folks said, we want to do more, and we want our church to do more. And out of that, the church began humanitarian programs. And later came Latter-day Saint Charities. Later came Perpetual Education Fund. And other ways of reaching out to help our own and help the world. In this case, as soon as the church started the humanitarian fund, a bunch of these folks together Businessmen like, I'm speaking of companies, Larry Miller, Auto, Darf Motors, University of Utah experts, a person from Mali that was getting a PhD at the U, a couple of the 70, LDS Church, got together and said, what can we do on our own? Now the church is starting to do some outreach. What can we do ourselves? And they got together with a bunch of housewives and students and started this Welasabu. It's one region in southern Mali, down here. It's a arrondissement, we call it a county. It'd be like Utah County had 25 villages, all made out of mud. No electricity, no paved roads. The best transportation is a bicycle. No money. And so they started working down there to figure out what could we do to reach out to Muslim people in the poorest part of Africa. And so for over 2 decades now, a bunch of LDS families and others, one of the Catholic bishops in Salt Lake, Elder Marion D. Hanks of the 70, when there was only 7 in the presidency of the 70s, Chieko Okazaki, who was young Relief Society General Presidency member, one of the 3, they said we ought to be doing more. And let's pick a place that's really suffering. Let's not go just down south of the reservation or inner city Detroit. Let's go to where a huge number of children die every day, where mothers have no access to any medical services they're delivering. And so they started this village bank, micro-lending. They also created an agriculture co-op where about 50 women farmers banded together and started growing crops jointly. They catch a vision, although they've never met Gordon B. Hinckley, of what he talked about in his ministry. One of the things he said was, what is the world's worst pandemic? And when he asked that question at an event I had organized to honor him, and when he asked that question, somebody yelled out, the worst pandemic in the world today is war. Somebody else said it was climate change. Somebody else said it was this, it was that. He said, no, for me at least, he said, it's poverty. And what are you doing to reduce poverty? Later, he spoke at BYU, this middle quote, said he talked to students here. It's not enough to get a job, get married, and work hard to have a decent income. You need to go beyond that. You need to do more than that. Hurricane Mitch, as Brother Brow mentioned, hit Central America 1999. Actually, it was the end of 98. It destroyed billions of dollars in all of the capitals of Central America. Honduras was set back 50 years, according to the UN. Tegucigalpa was basically destroyed. 20,000 dead, 20,000 missing, 1 million homeless. And I was blessed to have some crazy students that said, Warner, yeah, let's take what we're learning in this microfinance class. Let's go practice it in Central America. And so they and I, in that class, we formed teams. The class started with 4 people. The next class, it had 8. Then the next Monday, it had 15 or so. The next Wednesday, it had 25. And it just grew exponentially. And I remember the dean telling me, Warner, if you want to teach that as an add-on, fine. Because I'd proposed I teach a class in microfinance. I'd only done some seminars before. I said, can I get a break from one of my regular assignments to teach microfinance? He said, no, you won't get sued. I said, yeah, because we're going to go help Central America. Anyway, he was shocked. Then numbers went from 20 or so to 40. And by the end of the semester, we had 86 take the class. Only 40 got credit. You're saying, yeah, that's the story of my life, right? They couldn't add it. It was too late when they heard about the class. We didn't have all this, what do you call this stuff now? Internet? Is that what? That new little technology they got here at BYU now? We didn't have any of that stuff. I just put some flyers around campus. Flyers are what we used to put up to advertise things in the old days. I'm having to explain all this to these young people here. So anyhow, that class took off. And we formed teams, and we decided where to go and logistics and what to do, how to work. They learned what microfinance was. They learned how to start it in the community. This is one of my favorite clients of that first year, Maria Elena. She was an impoverished woman. We went into this town, I think it was called Comayagua, and we found these extremely poor families. And we told them we're going to start a village bank. And if you want to learn about this, we'll be having training sessions every Saturday afternoon under the banyan tree in the town square. And we did that. And we probably met a half dozen times. We explained to them all this stuff I've just talked to you about. And then we said, okay, next meet. They organized themselves as a bank. They elected leaders of their bank. And we agreed to give each of those who qualified a $100 loan the next Saturday. And that Saturday came. And we were all excited, and we brought balloons and important things, so soda, you know, soda pop, Coca-Cola. It's how the world's based, you know, it's based on, or cocaine, there's two options. And so we sang the national anthem and passed out the drinks and celebrated. Any final questions? The leaders, we'd have these leaders running it to them. Then they said, okay, Hermano Werner, come up front and let's give out the first loan. And we decided we're going to give it to Maria Elena. I am all excited. I get up there. I say, guess who's getting the first loan? Maria Elena. And everybody clapped and cheered. And she said, oh, I can't come up. You know, she started to try to hide behind the other women sitting down on these little stools. And I said, oh, Maria, you're the first. You're the leader. You're the example. You're going to show us all how this works. Too much pressure. Finally, I asked the students to help her up to me, and I put my arm around her and explained, this is a loan. It's going to create a better life for you. This is your sacred trust. We know you're going to pay it back. We know you'll pay interest. We know you'll grow your little business. She had had 2 chickens. She wanted to get 20 and build a little wood, what do you call it? Chicken coop? Is that the technical term, Jimmy? And anyway, she gets up there, and I go to hand her $100 in Honduran money. And she bursts into tears. And I'm saying, what did I do? I didn't anticipate this. Come on, tell me what the problem is. Let's figure out how you can use this to benefit your life and have a future. And finally she just blurted out. She said, Senor, I am just a poor Indian woman. I am not worth $100. My life is worth nothing. And I got tears in my eyes as she expressed that, and she said, I just have no dignity, no self-respect. I've never even seen that much money. And I said, I know you can do it. You'll make it happen. We trust you. And she did. And I think it was about 7 or 8 years later, I went back. She had 20,000 chicks. She and her sisters had bought a piece of land behind their little shack, and they built this big chicken coop with, what do you call it, chicken wire, is that right? You know? So the transforming power of this stuff is pretty amazing. Here's what happened out of that first year down there. In summer '99, the floods, Hurricane Mitch destroyed them in November, December of '98. It's pretty amazing results. Not only did we do microfinance, we helped shovel the mud out of schools, refurbished homes, etc., etc., etc. So next year we went to El Salvador, and we started trying to focus more on empowering women. We launched this thing called square foot gardening, where you can get a small piece of land, and if you set it up right and put in certain nutrients, organic material, and lay out planting the seeds per square foot in such and such a pattern, you can triple your produce. So members and non-members of the church that we were working with began to grow 2 or 3 times more produce in their little gardens, and they could have better nutrition in the family and sell they had so much, they grew so much, became so successful, they'd take the excess and sell it in the town market. So these kinds of examples, I think, are potential, visions I'm hoping you can think about and maybe capture. Between 2001, 2013, we shifted. We started as Help Honduras. We shifted as we went to other countries, calling it Help International, H-E-L-P, Help Eliminate Poverty. And we've been since to all these other countries and offered various kinds of technologies, various kinds of systems, various kinds of income generating practices. And for the students, they found they can actually make a difference in one person's life or one family's life or one village's life. Some students came back having delivered babies that summer. I remember one of them. Her name was Vicky. We heard her dad speak at General Conference. She was pretty much inactive as a student in her day. She was able to fake the honor code approvals from her bishop and stuff. And she didn't like BYU, but her roommate decided to go to Help Honduras. So she went with her. So she didn't have to go live at home or stay at BYU. And that experience transformed her life. And she delivered 5 babies. And when she came back at the end of summer to come and meet with me and let me know, she'd got active in the church as she served others. She'd learned Spanish as she'd lived down there. She was going on a mission, winter semester. She also said she delivered 5 babies. And I said, oh, Vicki, that's great. Congratulations. I didn't know you were in pre-med courses. She said, I'm not. I'm an accounting student. I was pretty scared. I said, how many of those babies lived? She said they all lived. Then I was reading. Out of these kinds of experience come folks like Jack and Lisa Williams in Elk Grove, California, who heard about this stuff, who liked this idea, who came to a seminar we spoke at, who'd read that Working Towards Zion book, and Jack was a stake president. Got his MBA here, joined the church, went on a mission, came back, got his MBA here. Married Lisa in the temple. Now he's a stake president in Elk Grove. And he said, Warner, what can I do? I'm so busy with my business and my stake calling. I can't go live in the third world. What can I do? We talked about creating a little action group, Microfinance action group. And so they did. And they invited a few neighbors and a few LDS friends in their state to their home for one meeting, one night. And out of that, they started to form this little group. And it's sort of like a book club, neighborhood book club, only this is read and then act. So it's an action group. So every month or two, they read a book, some new volume on poverty or suffering or microfinance or whatever. And then they pool donations, and they usually generate 3,000 or 4,000. There's about 20 people involved. And then they give that money to an NGO, and that NGO gives it to people in El Salvador. And this was a shot 4 or 5 years ago when they went down to meet these women's banks they'd been donating to for 6 or 8 months. Another example. Now this is a little different. This is not a student thing. This is, well, it started as a student thing, but I realized there's tons of Mormon rich people, tons of entrepreneurs, lots of folks who want to do good. Some are nurses, some are school teachers. They're not the rich. Some are CEOs. Some are founders of companies. They want to do something besides write checks to the government for their taxes or the church for their tithing. They want to get more involved. You know, like face-to-face. Are we face-to-face now? Can we, oh, he's eating his vitamins here, his Ritz vitamins. Cool, keep that going. So some of these type people came to me and said, this was 88, 89, and they said, Warner, we want to do something. We want to take action. We hear what the brethren say. We read these scriptures about building Zion. How might we do that? And out of that, some of them who'd served missions or been mission presidents and had businesses across the U.S., they're now saying, how can we help our people? When I was a mission president, one of them said, I gave out about $1,000 to poor members. And Every one of them was a loan. And they all said they'd pay it back. How many do you think paid them back? Huh? 0. Why? Say it. They think it's a gift. He said it was a loan, but they took it as a gift. It's charity, member to member, right? And so I said, well, you got to depersonalize that. You got to create a system to provide loans and manage the loans and get them repaid. Because if it's just you, they know you're not going to come after them. You're just a mission president. You're not the cops. Well, some mission presidents have been cops, I guess. So these guys are saying, we don't know what to do. So I described